Do indicators really work in Forex trading? Today I'm going to talk about the positives and negatives of using indicators in Forex trading and do they actually work? So if you do a Google search under Forex, under images, you'll see systems and pictures of systems. Uh, and I found this one to be interesting. You can see that this image here is showing a sell, and with the line here that indicates where the actual sell actually is. But if you look at the indicators, you'll see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's more than 10 indicators on this chart. Now, does that make it a good system? The more indicators that you have that are working together to make something really powerful? No, not necessarily. If you've done any kind of research with indicators, you'll find that most of them, it doesn't matter if they're new or old, are lagging in some way. They lag behind price, and that's just the nature of indicators. They follow price, and in most cases, because of how price works in the time frames, they have to lag in some way or form. So, can that be helpful? Yes, it can be helpful, and depends on what kind of system that you're using. But the more indicators that you have doesn't necessarily mean a better system or a more profitable system. So I'm going to get into why I think that less indicators is better than more indicators. How I like to trade is in a very minimalistic way. I usually will have either 0 indicators on a chart, or besides the candlesticks, which is an indicator by itself, by the way, or I'll have 1 or maybe 2 maximum on chart, depending on how I'm trading it. I think that a cleaner chart is better because you can actually see what's happening with the price a bit better. So let's take, for example, the Euro US dollar. What's been happening in the Euro US dollar in the last little while? Well, you can tell that it's moving downwards. Do you need an indicator showing you that it's moving downward? No, because you can see where, at least on the 1 hour chart, you can see where the price started and where it's ended, and it's down, right? And if you go to the higher time frames, it changes. You'll see that the higher time frame is still looking somewhat down, but it also depends on how far you zoom out, right? Because some people may consider this a uptrend, and then potentially for that to continue upward like that. And then also, if you go to the daily time frame, and if you zoom in a bit, you'll also see that this could potentially be categorized as an uptrend as well, right? So it really depends on the time frame that you're trading. I mean, some systems are scalp the market, some are trend trading, some are counter trend trading, but trend is all relative to what time frame that you're trading. So that's what's really tricky about trend trading is that people say, "Oh, well, it's an uptrend." Well, it's an uptrend, but what time frame are you talking about? Is it multiple time frames? Is it the 4 hour, the daily, the weekly? Because that makes a big difference. Because if it's an uptrend on the weekly, then you could have 100, 200, 300 pips down on the 4 hour chart. And so the idea of a trend is very relative, and can be very confusing to many traders. So, do we need an indicator showing us? No. We can find out that this has been moving down. The Euro US dollar has been moving down since April 17th. And the reason why I'm taking April 17th is because just before that there was a pullback. So it's a push down, pullback up, and an extension down, breaking or passing the last swing level or support level here. Okay. So the downtrend. We don't need an indicator showing us that it's moving down. But what about the pullbacks? Because there's some pullbacks, minor pullbacks here. Do we need indicators showing us where those are? No, not really, because we can see through the candlesticks, which again, I don't want to discount this as an indicator because the candlesticks are an indicator themselves. But there is a pullback here and pullback here, and you can tell, and a lot of times you can get hints at the price, that there is going to be a pullback. And it depends on what the candlesticks look like. So for example, you see a nice hammer candle here with a bigger wick, one here as well. And you can see that there is some support in this area, right? and price actually showed that. Now the extension back up was not very heavy, and then it extended back down, breaking this level, and then moved and pushed down further. So there was another candle here that was an indication for a possible bounce up, but that just didn't happen. So this is technical trading that we're talking about here, right? So if this is a really powerful candle, it indicates a potential push back up. Why was it in the next hour just completely canceled out and pushed back down further? Well, you have to keep in mind the news that's taking place. You have to read the news at Forex Factory or anywhere really. FX Street I like a lot to see what is actually pushing price. Is price pushing down in a technical way, or is it fundamental, or is it a combination of both, which in a lot of the cases it is? And what is actually happening? So let's say that I've been trading the odd Canadian dollar, Aussie Canadian dollar for a while. And I look at the Euro US dollar, and I want to know what's been going on with it. So I can see technically speaking that it's been moving down since April 17th, and they've had some minor pullbacks, excuse me, in that push down, right? So I know it's a downtrend, and I want to find out what's been happening in the news because that feels like that's what's been pushing this down because there's been minimal pullbacks in the price, right? So the news is saying, and if you just kind of watch CNN and if you watch the news on a daily basis, you can kind of gather or get an idea of what's actually going on. So recently, there's been a lot of pressure uh, up until, well, the 17th of April. There's been a lot of pressure on the US dollar. Trump's been very volatile. The price movement has been very political. Uh, and the tariffs were a real big mess starting out. The tax cuts were very questionable. Uh, Capitol Hill was drama filled. Trump was firing people, and it was just chaos. So what's happening now to change the course of the euro US dollar or just the US dollar in general? That is the tariffs have finally sunk in, and which they were negative for many weeks or even a month after they came out. But it's now starting to turn positive. The tariffs are. It's starting to the outlook, investors and the people are starting to see that the tariffs are now looking like something could be positive for the USD, at least in the short term. And the tax cuts, they're also looking positive for the economy. And again, at least in the moment right now. There's been a lot of articles coming out about the U.S. dollar, the U.S. hitting a milestone, that the economy is growing at a faster pace, interest rates are being raised a lot more, and we're finally starting to move out of that recession from 2009. So things are starting to shape up for the U.S. dollar, and Trump is starting to it's looking like, at least for now, like he's becoming a little bit more settled in. And again, here we go to the political side of trading. But the US dollar right now is very focused on what Trump is doing and how he's doing it. So when it comes to indicators, how much can these indicators help you in such a volatile time of this Trumpism? Because what's showing you is a downtrend or an uptrend on the Euro US. There goes my headphones again. What's showing you that's an uptrend can change instantly depending on what Trump releases. So, for example, what happened with the tariffs was a big negative hit towards many different currencies, especially the Canadian dollar, and how that changed things dramatically in a matter of hours or even minutes. So indicators are not great right now. Technical trading is not great as well because we're in a very news driven price or market right now, and a lot of it's political. So I try to get people to throw those indicators away because they're lagging already, and they're not going to be to show you what's happening right in real time because of that delay. So, candlesticks are helpful because they show you what's happening in real time, but still there's delays in any kind of market trading. So, for looking at the euro US dollar, and I like to try to find areas in the market where there are potential pullbacks, and you can see them. Now, just because it happened in the past, it makes it easier to see, but you can see where ones where it didn't really happen. There was a nice candle right here that showed a potential push up, and that was just it was minimal. It was very small and it extended back down. There was this area of support pushed up, minimal, and then it came back down. There was this candle here and this area of support, which was immediately canceled out and pushed down further. This one here, and this one had a little bit of a push up. There was also a bit here, extended further down, but you can see that it's getting tighter. So push down, a little further push down, and then another support area here. So there was some decent support in this area, and it did bounce up a bit, but still, we're not getting a lot of pullback in the market. There was a test of the low here with the potential to bounce again, and it just keeps pushing down. So what's happening here is a trend. This is what you'd call a trend, right? Because and how do we figure out that this is a trend? Well, it's not that hard. You can see that it's moved down. The swing lows or the last support levels are being broken, right? See, this one was holding for a little bit, right? Looked like it was a double bottom, and then it broke down as well. So now we're back down to another support area that could potentially bounce up from here, but we're seeing some action right now that could break this area, especially if a candle closes in full strength below this support level down here. Okay, so guys, this is just standard price action techniques. Do you need Fibonacci's? Do you need support resistance? No, you can just see all this directly on chart just by looking at the candlesticks. Now it really depends on what time frame that you're using, and that's why I like people to challenge me when it comes to trend trading, because they're saying, oh well, you were talking about a downtrend when the trend was actually up. Most people like to trend trade on the 1 hour, 4 hour, daily, weekly, and monthly time frames. And in most cases, when they're trend trading, they're using the higher time frames because they show the bigger picture, which is kind of what you're wanting to look at. But you can't forget about what's happening on the M5, M15, M30 as well, because those show you what's happening in what's happening right now, right? So that's why trend trading can be so difficult, is because a lot of people trade on the higher time frames and get stopped out because their stops are too tight, depending in reflection to the time frame that they're using, or they're too tight. So uh, your system has to incorporate smart trading tactics. Uh, and you should be looking at not just certain time frames. You should be looking at all of them to get a better idea of how the market's working now and where it potentially may go in the future. So that's pretty much what I have to say when it comes to indicators on in forex trading. Do they work? They can help. Yes, they can help. I don't think that they should be the sole driver of your trading. You shouldn't trust your indicators. You should be focusing more on what's happening with the candlesticks, what's happening with price, because the candlesticks can tell you so much of where and what's happening in the market, where there could be potential pullbacks, where the trend may continue. But you also have to include what's happening in the news. Since it's very political right now, you should be following on Trump. If it's the US dollar pairs that you're trading, well, you should be following Trump even if it's any pairs that you're trading. Um, and you should also be looking at the news. What's happening with FOMC, with no farm payroll? Are interest rates being planned to push up? All these things should be included in your trading. You can't just be a, at least you shouldn't, be just a technical trader, and you shouldn't just be a fundamental trader. You should understand both, and you should be able to use both to their full potential. Um, because if you exclude one of those, then I think that you're at a disadvantage. You should know all the pieces to the puzzle before trying to build it, right? So that's what I have to say about using indicators. I hope that you guys can start taking away some of those indicators so they don't look like something like this. You don't need something to baby you in trying to figure out where the trend is going, where the support resistances are. You just need to see that and try to figure that out by looking at the chart yourself. Because if once you can see the chart without any indicators on and start studying it in a different way by trying to read where price may be going, what it's doing, then you can maybe figure out better indicators to use, whether it's one or two, or if it's none, then you can dissect and build a system better when you understand the price instead of trying to rely on indicators. All right, thanks guys for watching. Hope to come out with another update soon.